About 1 year ago, I began project-based learning here at Full Sail University. And the big project in our curriculum is challenge-based research. And here I'm going to present to you the results of the research and the work I have been doing here at Full Sail in the last year. I teach in a computer lab for kids that have struggled in the regular classroom. Many of them have passed their SOLs and shown competency in subject matters for which the course they were unable to pass. This is often the result of an inability to just fit in the regular classroom. Because of the challenge these kids find with learning in an institutional environment, here at Full Sail, the ADDIE design process was an emphasis in the educational media design and technology process. ADDIE is a 5-stage process which helps in the creation of just about anything, and I found it very useful in challenge-based research. ADDIE is an acronym, and it stands for the analysis phase, the design phase, the development phase, the implementation phase, and the evaluation phase. Analysis is the process where I decide who are my learners and what are their characteristics, and we've talked about that some. And we want to talk about what are our delivery options. I'm in a computer lab, so all the kids have a PC, and we want to talk about a timeline for the project. My students are seniors on the way out, so time was limited. We had to get things going this year and help them understand their lifelong learning platform. The design phase is the area where what are the learning objectives? We decide on those, and how are we going to assess, and what kind of exercises are we going to do? And the development phase is where we actually develop and create the content and assets that will be used for the project. There's, of course, the implementation phase, and that's the phase where I actually sat down with students and we created their lifelong learning platforms, and we discussed what they need and how we would meet their needs. And then finally, there's the evaluation process, and I used pre- and post-survey results to evaluate my students, and much of that evaluation was done through an interview process and conversation with my students to really find out how things were going with their new technology platforms. Full Sail ensured that I spent time on each phase, as these were requirements in the classes as I made my way through and earned my degree. So we focused on the analyze phase, and we took a lot of time to really understand who my students were. And the design phase, I took real time to look at the assessments that I've made and decide, what is going to be the instructional strategy that I'm going to use, and what are the intended behavioral outcomes that I want. And the intended behavioral outcome is I wanted students to implement this technology into their life and know how to use it. The development phase was a very fluid phase for me. I felt like by the time I got to the development phase, the analysis and design phase had prepared me to create an instructional model to teach kids how to make these LLL platforms. The implementation phase is when I got to sit down with students and we got to really get into the meat of their project. And I feel like overall, using this ADDIE process was essential to being organized and linear in the creation of the LLL platforms. An important issue that is discussed in the literature of online learning is the myth of the digital native. Before the myth of the digital native was something that was written about, the idea of, or the concept that it was a fact of the digital native was discussed. And what that means is a digital native is what young people were previously expected to be. Because they grew up in this digital world, they're expected to know more than their teachers about technology and that sort of thing. And of course, as with any stereotype, there are examples of truth in this. But at the end of the day, kids might know how to use their PlayStation really well, but that doesn't mean that they know how to do the things with a computer that society needs them to be able to do to be productive adults and workers. You can look here in the Journal of Online Learning and Teaching, an article called Digital Natives 10 Years After. And I bring your attention to this quote: because the myth of the digital native is still alive and well, this article aims to examine the findings that have come out of recent research with regard to digital natives and their true nature, as well as turn a critical gaze onto the assumptions taken as common sense knowledge of what the characteristics of digital natives are. What this boils down to, in my opinion, is that teachers and the academic establishment have been under the impression that kids know how to do stuff just because. And that's not true. Kids need to be taught, just like anybody else, how to do things they haven't done before. So, as my students are beginning to graduate from high school, I decided with their lifelong learning platforms to help them establish a formal online presence via the Google suite of products and services. Google offers a tremendous amount of tools available to students, more than I could have them use in this simple challenge-based research project. So I decided it's important to narrow down the important functions that I wanted kids to have. And one of the things was I certainly wanted them to have a home base on the internet. I wanted them to have all the tools necessary for basic communication. Email would be an example of that. So I looked to sources such as this simple 32 uses of Google in the classroom, titled Google Apps in the Classroom and Schools, 32 Ways to Use Google Apps, and that's by Julia Stiglitz. And I used this article to help me determine what were the most important tools for kids. And basically it came down to they needed email and they needed a home base. And then I decided that as I talked to the students, I would determine what other kinds of tools they wanted and needed. My research can offer a great contribution to the body of literature that exists now, and I feel like many of the students in this program are in the same position simply because digital learning and educational media is a new factor in the educational establishment. There's not a lot of research about lifelong learning platforms, at least relative to the entire body of research about educational practices that exist. I feel that this research is on the cutting edge, and it's very important because I feel like there are many students that are in the same position as mine and are struggling in the traditional classroom, need to continue to be lifelong learners when they finish school, and platforms such as this Google Lifelong Learning platform is the kind of tool that can enable these students to be successful once they have left school. Ultimately, the Full Sail Educational Media Design and Technology program has prepared me to use a workflow with technology to teach any kind of student, as I have done here with my CBR project.